This is Viterbi Voices.
Coming to you from the University of Southern California, Viterbi School of Engineering.
We're here to give you the inside scoop on research, classes, student life, and so much more.
All of these shared by students, faculty, alumni, and other members of the USC community.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Viterbi Voices. As usual, I am one of your hosts. My name is Paul Ledesma, Executive Director of Undergraduate Admission here at the USC Viterbi School of Engineering.
And I am Saafiyah, your new co-host for season 10 of the Viterbi podcast, or Viterbi Voices podcast.
Very cool. Saafiyah, how are you doing?
I'm well. I'm finally back in Orange County. Been getting a lot of rest since I've been back from New York, so it's been a good time.
Great. Well, welcome back to recording all in the same time zone. And thank you. This is your second episode of the season. So far, so good. Thank you for being here. And this episode that we are about to do is all about the admission process, the application process. The Common App came out last week, or a week or so, a week and a half ago now. And so many times when the application comes out, we get a lot of questions. And so, Saafiyah, you have created an outline of things we're going to discuss today about, myths and legends related to admission in the application season, frequently asked questions, and maybe some kind of off-the-wall questions. Is that what I was hearing you got ready for us?
Yeah, I've scoured past live chats, Reddits, comments on the Instagram, even asked some of the other student ambassadors questions that they've been asked during different information sessions we've had. So I have a good list ready for all of you.
Okay, so, and that tips our hand to what's going on. We have a number of guests with us here today. We brought the entire staff of the undergraduate admission office here in the Viterbi School of Engineering to answer these questions and to fill your ears with knowledge and information. And to start us off, we'll have each of them introduce themselves, starting with Becky.
Hi, I am Becky. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admission for the Viterbi School of Engineering. Exciting to answer all your burning questions, and hopefully we can get a lot of the myths debunked in this podcast today.
Hi, I'm Angie, the Senior Associate Director. Welcome to our podcast.
And hello, my name is Brooke Hyman. I'm the Associate Director, and I'm happy to be here.
What's up, everyone? My name is Lisa Rosas. I'm the Senior Assistant Director of Undergraduate Admission for the Viterbi School, and I'm just happy to be here.
I'm just chilling. I'm happy to be here. So we got us here. Saafiyah, I'm going to let you take the reins. Do you want to give the listeners? Is there an arc? Is there a thing that we're going to be going through here today? What's going to happen?
So I'm going to start with the typical questions that I'm sure all of you have been asked in every information session that you've been in. And then as we go on, they're going to become a little more outlandish, I would say. Towards the end is really those burning questions that people find a little taboo to ask almost. But we're going to start off very traditional questions.
And to be clear, you've picked all of these from real life examples on the internet. These are not things you're making up. We should probably remind people throughout the episode that you are not making these up. These are actual questions that were asked.
Yep. All of these are questions I found asked by other students online. They're not my personal misconceptions either. I want to put that out there, clear the air. They're all things that I felt were a common consensus from prospective students in the past, or even that I've seen in the last couple of months of students going into their cycles right now. Yeah.
The only thing I'll also add on to this is that the majority of these questions are likely going to revolve around first year admission, meaning students that are applying out of high school. However, we might get some questions related to transfer admission. But even if we don't, we might try to jump in and give you just a little bit of taste of some of the transfer stuff. I want to be clear, we're not ignoring the transfer population. It's just that is a far more detailed conversation that we'll probably have later in the year as transfer students are looking to apply. Usually they apply in the winter months, and this is usually the time that the high school students there. But if you're a transfer student, you're listening, we'll make sure that we'll do our best to outline when something is specific to first year admission or if there's a difference for transfer admission in the future.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, Paul, because I'm also a transfer student, so it was a little daunting coming into everything, but we will definitely be covering topics like that either in this episode or down the line in the future as well.
All right, hit us.
Yes, the first question, very common question. How do I, as a student, stand out in the admissions process? So there's a couple parts to this question. Basically, like, what is the secret sauce to get admitted? And what do you guys value most when you're looking at an admissions or a student to be admitted?
I mean, I'll start because because I can't sit in awkward silence, apparently. I hate to disappoint all those students out there that are looking for the algorithm that will get you into college. There is no secret sauce. There is really nothing that we can tell you how to stand out. I think the most important thing in your application is to be authentic to who you are, because we want to get to know you as a student. If I tell you to go do X, Y, and Z to stand out, and then, 15,000 of you do X, Y, and Z to stand out, no one stands out anymore. You're all the exact same. And so as we're reading applications, we are looking to admit a diverse group of students who are doing different things, students who have interests in different areas, students who want to take their engineering degree and go into different fields. And so we're kind of trying to put together this class of students that complement each other, but then also challenge each other. So there is no secret sauce in how, if I do this, I'll get admitted. But we do want to get to know who you are. So as you're filling out those short answer questions and the essays, let us know who you are, not who you think we want you to be. And I think that's really important, because a lot of times those people in your life that are supporting you in this, your parents, your teachers, your counselors, they, yes, have them edit your essays, make sure they're grammatically correct, and there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. But we want to know who you are as a person, not who you think admission officers want to read about. And I think that's the most important thing while you're, answering those questions and filling out your application.
Can I ask a follow-up to you all? Do we want students to stand out? Is that a good thing? Becky? It's an audio format, so you can't nod or shake your head at the same, like no one's going to know what you're saying.
No, I know. I went to the rest of the panelists if they wanted to jump in. No, it's not necessarily a good thing to stand out. Also, that is a very good point. Paul and I have been reviewing applications together for a very long time. And typically there are some good applications that we remember, like, oh, remember this student. But for the majority of the applications that stand out, it's the ones that they stand out and not in a good way. Right. So their essay is about something that maybe they shouldn't have written a college essay about, or, I don't know. They stand out, like I said, not in a good way. And those are the ones that I remember 12 years later.
Yeah.
So it's not always a good thing to stand out dramatically.
I think that's the main thing, is that sometimes people think they have to stand out. And so they make some interesting choices in their application to attempt to stand out. And when you attempt to stand out for the purpose of standing out, you end up standing out, but not for a positive reason. We make common comments about, trying out jokes inside your application. Maybe they weren't that funny, or maybe they come off as a little odd, we have different scenarios where a student attempted to write poetry in all of their essay or their quick answer response to everything else. And, maybe it would have been better just to answer the questions normally, because it got a little awkward and weird. That said, maybe if that's your skill set and that's what you want to do, because that's a big thing, I want you to look inward to your identity, to your skill set, to who you are as a person. And the application should be a reflection of who you are, and to repeat what Becky said, not who you believe we think we want you to be, or what you think we want you to be, because it just won't read well. We won't understand it, and it won't be authentic. And I think authenticity and your true self is what we're trying to understand. And my main bit of advice there is, do not underestimate your own story, your experiences, your challenges, your accomplishments, your achievements. Everything that you've done is what makes you who you are. And that's what we want to understand and know more about, and tell us that story, and tell us everything. Don't leave anything out. Don't assume we know something, and don't assume that something doesn't have value, because I will tell you that everything has value. Any other thoughts from anyone else when you get asked this question? Oh, Lisa, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry, Andy. I was just going to say real quick, like, I think you guys nailed it, but some of the best applications I've read are the ones where I'm like, I know this person so well. They're going to do great here. They're going to get along with current Viterbi students, and they're going to thrive in this type of setting. So just a well-written story of who you are.
Perfect. Thank you all for answering that question. This kind of leads into the next question I had. If I don't want to stand out as a student and there aren't specific things I can do to stand out, what are other ways that I can improve my chances of admission? Should I pick a specific major so that it's quote unquote easier to get in? Any thoughts on that question?
Yeah, that's a huge misconception, unfortunately. We have a very competitive admission rate for Viterbi, and all of our majors are equally competitive to get into. There's a huge misconception that you're alluding to, that there's one major that'll increase your chances of getting into our program. That is not the case. So typically, we recommend just apply to whatever interests you. It's the same chance of admission any major that you apply to.
Yeah, I'll second that. I tell students this a lot, that we're not reading by major. We're reading you as an engineering student coming into the engineering school. And there is that misconception for USC that we have impacted majors. While that may be true other places, we do not. So
yes, to clarify, we have no impacted programs. And what that means is that we have no set number of seats per academic program per major. So just keep that in mind. You're not changing your chances of admission by applying to one program or the other. And again, back to the first answer of authenticity, which I think will come up over and over and over again here. We want to know what you're really interested in, and just go after it. That helps us.
And if I could just add, this applies to first years and transfers, like the last couple questions we've been asking.
Yes.
Transfers, you should know there are set minimum requirements you actually have to meet, unlike the first year class, which we're not going to talk about here. Please check out our website for that. But in terms of authenticity and other ways to stand out, it's the same for transfers. Yes, you have to meet these academic requirements, but your story is also important. Who you are, why you want to study, why you want to transfer to USC. It's the answers apply, I think, to both kinds of students hearing this podcast.
Got it. Again, kind of leading into the next question. So if it doesn't really matter what major I'm applying to, how is the admissions process tailored to what major I am choosing? So how are you deciding who's getting into these specific majors? And should I be coming into the application process with a ton of experience in the major that I'm choosing?
I think the first thing that people should understand is that there is no way that a student can be more prepared for one major over another given a high school academic education. And it often comes up in questions that I get where a student says, I'm really interested in studying biomedical engineering, but I'm really concerned because I don't have biomedical engineering experience. And it's my response to that every time is, who does? Coming out of high school. The high school education is going to be very well balanced across, liberal arts and humanities, and there's math and science as well. And the preparatory programs that we're trying to understand a student to be prepared for an engineering degree program is you need to be doing well across all your academic subjects. But really, have you made progress through rigorous math and science courses at your high school? And specifically in mathematics, we need to see success proven in calculus to really get an understanding, if calculus was available to you at your school. Those elements, science classes vary from high school to high school. We don't have specific science requirements. And calculus is not necessarily a requirement, but it is strongly recommended because there is a correlation to success in calculus to success in an engineering program. So we do want to see that. If it was available at your school, we expect that you've taken calculus and that you've done well in those programs. And if you haven't done well, that has concerns for us in your preparation to any engineering degree program. Some students may think like, oh, I need to be taking programming or computer science classes to study computer science. And that is not the case either, because that doesn't necessarily mean you're more prepared for our program. Our program can teach students that have experience and students that don't have experience. And there is no correlation to preparation prior to our program to success in our program related to computer science. So taking programming classes, also just noteworthy, programming classes are available at a few schools across the country, and it is more often than not available to a student attending high school in the United States to have programming experience. So don't worry about that. And you can carry that through in every single discipline. I'm confident there's no such thing as a chemical engineering class at any of your high schools, whoever you're listening. I'm confident there's no such thing as an aerospace engineering class at your high school. And maybe there are some schools that have some little, dip your toe in the water, pre-engineering type elements, and that could be related to maybe they're doing a robotics team, or maybe they're involved in some sort of engineering design team at their school, or maybe they actually have an engineering class where they're kind of covering these different concepts. And that's all fine. And that's great. And if you had that experience, I'm glad to hear about it. But I also don't want you to think that you have a better chance of admission because you have that. And if you don't have that, I want you to think that you don't have a good chance of admission. It's really about your core academic subjects, and specifically math and science, for preparation. And have you been doing well in rigorous courses? That is a primary element that we really need to understand. And that's where we can make the decision. And when we admit, we're admitting to the thing you told us you're interested in. And so when you apply to a particular program, we're going to admit you directly to that program.
Does anyone else have anything else they want to touch on for that question?
I guess the second part of your question to us was, do I need to have extensive experience, which in things, and sometimes I think high school students who don't have any experience, maybe you're taking math and you're taking science, but your high school doesn't offer a lot of engineering type courses. They think that other students getting into engineering programs have, been coding since they were 3 years old, or have been building rockets in their garage with their dad forever. But for the most part, for the majority of students, that's not the case. Some of our most successful students are a student who started taking AP computer science her senior year, and by October realized she loved it and came here. Another, we have students who go to arts high schools. So their passion is art or dance, and then they come here, but they also like electrical engineering, and they graduate and they're super successful. So I think that's something important. And I kind of want to circle back to something Paul said in the first answer about don't undervalue some of your experiences. So if your passion is art and music or leadership or something like that, that maybe you don't see relating too much to engineering, that's still who you are and important. And don't think that we just want to see your programming and your robotics team. Put everything that you are involved in and the things that you are most passionate about, even if it's not engineering, put that as a major part of your activities and your time and, your high school experience, because that's who you are. And so I think that that's really important, to not devalue things that you think are not valuable to an engineering program, because they are valuable to who you are as a person. And that's what we want to get to know.
I think that kind of goes in line with students that are stressing about the short answer questions in specific. You all mentioned trying to really show your authenticity and who you are in those short answer questions. And people get so scared to touch upon things that they do outside of engineering in those questions specifically. They think that they really need to tailor it to every accomplishment they have in engineering specifically. And when I was doing my doom scroll on Reddit, a lot of people were
Doom scroll.
a lot of people were stressing about these short answer questions, even the ones where it's just asking you your favorite food or your dream career. Becky has something to say about this, but
Can we first specify, there's different types of questions on the application. So, I mean, Becky, would you mind giving an outline of what the different sections are? Because something's called the short answer, something's called something else, something's called it's just people get really confused.
Yeah, when you were saying, I was laughing because when you were saying short answer, I was thinking of the actual short answer questions. And so on the common application, there is a personal statement, essay, if you will, that you must submit. And then USC has short answer questions that are short answers, right? 250 words is what we're looking for. So not another essay.
Not essays. Yeah. AKA not essays.
One paragraph, maybe 2, if it's grammatically correct to have 2. But yeah, and then there's a few short answer questions on the USC part of the common application. And then there's something called quick takes. And this is what you were talking about, Saafiyah. What is your favorite food? If you had a theme song, about your life, what would your theme song be? So those are just quick takes. And so those are sort of the different writing elements. And then there's an activities resume where you talk about, if you're on a sports team, if you have a part-time job, whatever, the things you do outside of class.
That was I didn't even know it was called quick takes before right now. I just thought they were different forms of the short answers. But people were stressed about how to tailor even the quick takes to their engineering persona that they were trying to build up on their application, because everyone wants to build up this amazing engineer portfolio to kind of sell to the admissions.
I feel like we're going to keep going back to that over and over again. It's we keep saying you don't, and this is so funny is even though we've answered that question already where we say don't do that, as we dive into even more of these questions, it's going to be built on the assumption that is true to start with. So most of our answers as we move forward are okay, remember what we said about that? So you tear that apart. Yeah, right. I'm not saying it's a bad question, but it's we do have to call that out, because I've been in Q&A sessions live with people where we have the question order that you're going in right now, and we talk about what we just talked about with authenticity and don't assume some sort of engineering persona. And then literally 2 questions later, we get this exact question right now. Like, so am I supposed to talk only about my engineering stuff? I'm like, are we not recognizing the context of this conversation?
Yeah, I
No, it's
totally agree
good.
with that.
Keep going. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's
No,
just like
you're good.
it's a really interesting concept.
It was crazy to me that people were so stressed about it because when I was filling out my short answer, I was just writing the most random things that came to my mind. Like for the dream career, I think I wrote about being someone who rates hotels. So I was whenever people ask me even my advice, even though I don't think I'm the most credible person to be giving advice about admissions, I just tell them to really be themselves and like sell who they are as a person. If your friend was asking an admission advisor what they thought of you, like that's what you really want to come across in your essays and in your application overall. One of the questions that I was going to ask is about the short answer question about the grand challenges in specific. A lot of applicants were wondering if they have to tailor that specific question to the major that they're applying for. Any thoughts on that? I see some shaking heads already.
Yeah, I'll
So
start this one. Oh.
go ahead. No, Lisa.
No, you do not have to tailor it to the major that you're interested in. You just have to find or pick one of the challenges that interests you. It can relate, it doesn't have to. But really, it's just if you had the opportunity to pick this challenge, like why? We've seen some students that are interested in CS and they pick one of the water related challenges. So it doesn't matter. It's just whatever you feel passionately about.
Angie, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah. So yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing as Lisa, but you don't need to do a deep dive either on these 14 grand challenges. You don't need to be like, here's my research and this is how I actually think, you keep your secrets, but think about like more why is that important to you? Why is this something that we should think about and why is it important to you? So you don't, again, no need to prove to us that you are an engineer. No need to prove to us that you have a technical background. Just the question says which one is more important and why. So answer that. And, it doesn't have to be technical. It doesn't have to be engineer-y. And you don't have to do a deep dive into what these, like just read what the grand challenges are.
Nowhere in our question do we ever say connected to your major. And I think people are reading way too much into it. Which one do you think is most important and why? And also the other thing we're not asking you to solve it. A lot of people think that they're supposed like, I got to really figure this out and I got to solve it. And they get really scared. And I'm like, if it was easily solved by application, it wouldn't be one of the grand challenges. And we were just interested. We're just interested to get to know you more. Every one of these questions is all designed to get to know you more.
Again, a common theme throughout this episode. If maybe I should make that the title of this episode instead. But the next question kind of goes back to something you mentioned earlier on, Paul, about how we want to see success in calculus and science when you are an applicant for the Viterbi school. Why is calculus even so important? I feel like this is a question that comes up a lot. Like there's such an emphasis on calculus and applicants don't necessarily know why we emphasize that so much.
I'm trying not to answer all the questions because I'm on this a lot. So who wants to jump in?
I'll go ahead and start. So calculus is like the foundation of a lot of our majors. And we're seeing that if students have exposure, oftentimes they don't do as well, not only in their engineering specific courses, but sometimes just generally speaking at USC. So we want to make sure you guys have a solid foundation to succeed here. So we really do push that. But keep in mind, we understand some students can't take calculus, and that is not going to hurt you in the application process. Some high schools actually don't even offer calculus. Let us know on the application if you're qualified in other areas. Like we will consider that. But we've seen how having a familiarity with calculus can really help you succeed overall once you get into USC.
And I will say, I asked Paul this question about a year ago when I first became a student ambassador, because I was curious about this too. And he mentioned how calculus is very different from the other maths that you take before you get to that calculus sequence. So you just want some exposure in it because we want to see your success in that specifically. I keep saying we as if I'm also a part
I
of
was
the
going to say, who's
team.
we? I'm like, yeah, I'm like,
no.
you're like, why do you keep saying we? You're not involved in this.
Yeah, I'm just like out here reading everyone's essays.
Well, I mean, so, go back to you, Saafiyah. I mean, like, you recently went through this, like the
Mhm.
idea of not too long ago, you took your very first calculus class. What is the difference?
I will say I feel like other people have a sense of what calculus is before they jump into it. When I got to my first calculus class, I had no idea. And I got there and I was like, why are there so many different variables and symbols and what is going on? And I will say, even just having the thought process of how to solve those problems helps you when you get to engineering problems. I feel like that's not something people really consider of how does this even relate to engineering? If I'm a computer science major, am I really going to be throwing in derivatives into my code? But just the problem solving and just seeing how your mind kind of adapts to solving those questions is going to help you as a quote unquote engineer when you get to college.
Yeah, at its core, philosophically, it is the foundation to problem solving that is not formulaic.
Mhm.
And I think most math up to that point is somewhat, follow this pattern. Just do
Yeah.
this over and over and over again. The more rote memorization you have of a pattern, you can kind of do math, one hand behind your back.
Mhm.
Calc is entirely different. It's like a puzzle, and everything is, you have to kind of remember things to use at certain points, and it just gets super complicated. And it is a fantastic lead into where this all goes, because as you mentioned, it starts to go into the code that you're going to use, or it starts to go into the formulas you're going to use. It starts to go into the physics that you're going to use, the thermodynamics. All of those things are going to be involved. And it is quite literally a one-to-one correlation of when students are admitted without success in calculus, they struggle mightily in an engineering program. And while we said we don't want to, you know, we don't want to make it a requirement, because again, there's different situations and we want to understand those situations. If you don't have calculus, just give us the context in the application. But it is a strong, weighted element. I don't want to say weighted, that's the wrong word. It's a strong element in our application review process to determine your preparation for success in any of our engineering programs. Angie, you wanted to jump in?
I did, just to provide the voice of transfer, so we don't.
Oh, yes,
you
for
know.
transfer applicants.
Yeah.
This is different. Yes, transfer
Yeah.
applicants. Yeah.
This is so transfer students. This is the part of the podcast that doesn't apply to you because you actually have calculus requirements, at least Calc 2. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into the specifics of that because it's really detailed and in depth. And so check out our transfer site. But transfers, you got to take Calc, and there's no way around that. And we should have said what a transfer student is a while ago. So if I
Oh,
can
yeah.
just
Thank you. Yeah.
clarify really quickly, because we have high school students taking community college and university courses too. The university defines a transfer student as someone who has graduated high school or earned the equivalent of a high school diploma. So if you're currently a high school student and you might finish an AA, but you haven't graduated high school, you need to apply as a first year applicant. So if you finished high school, you graduated high school, maybe you already got a degree and you're coming back to school for a second degree, you're a transfer, I think. And that's it.
Perfect. And we will cover a lot more of, I know that's something that me and Paul talked about early on about having more transfer content this year. So hopefully we'll have that for all of you in the future. Going back to me saying we in admissions, this is another question that came up a lot.
Yeah.
Who's even reading these applications? I feel like a lot of people that are applying don't really understand how the behind the scenes process works. They think that some robot is like back there reading all of their applications, or that they have regional directors that are reading their applications. There's a lot of different theories of who's really touching their applications and coming across it. So
Let's start with the clear thing that you alluded to in the beginning of the question, which is students like you are not. And I bring that up because oftentimes prospective students will start coming to you all as current students and be like, what should I do? How should I do this? And they'll think, well, you got admitted, so you know how it works. And it's like, no, Saafiyah, you have no idea how this works. You're not involved in this process. You don't see the applications. You're not involved in the decisions. And so I know that there's a sense of like, oh, you've done it, so like help me understand it. And I think that our current students can help provide some feedback as far as like they've gone through the application process, but everyone does it in their own individual ways, and how someone did it doesn't necessarily mean that increases one's chances of admission. Because remember that as somewhat of a highly selective institution, we are not admitting students that are highly qualified. So it has nothing to do with qualifications. There are great applications that we read that we just don't have the room for. So just realize that, again, this is, again, back to that core question of there's no formula to this. We're going to keep going back to that over and over again, and just keep that in mind as we read. But from a reading perspective, who wants to jump in and tell people how applications kind of exist at this university? Because it is different than a lot of others.
I'll go.
Becky, go for it. Yeah.
So every university is a little bit different. So other schools you're looking at might do the application review process completely different than what I'm about to tell you. So who is reading these? A lot of different people are reading your application. There are multiple eyes on every single application to the university. And so for Viterbi students, if you apply first choice engineering, has to be a first choice. Your first choice has to be one of the engineering programs. You will be reviewed by, first of all, the central admission office, the main admission office at USC. They are the ones that manage the application, collect the documents, put them all together, and then every single one of you has what we call a territory manager. And so a staff member at the university is in charge of your area. And you can look up your territory manager on the main admission website, so admission.usc.edu. Put in your high school name, and it'll tell you who your admission counselor is. They are reviewing every application from your high school. They are reviewing for general admission to the university. Have you completed high school? Are you doing well in your courses? Any of those sort of things that the university is looking for. And then if you have your first choice major is one of the engineering programs, your application will be reviewed. We will have input on your application from the Viterbi School of Engineering. So every engineering application gets input from the Viterbi School on what we are looking for in those applications. And so multiple eyes are on applications, definitely someone in central admission, someone in Viterbi, maybe multiple people in central admission, maybe multiple people in Viterbi, but it's sort of a group effort when we're reviewing those applications. At Viterbi, we make recommendations on admission, and then the university has the final say in who is ultimately admitted to the first year or transfer class and who is not. So we work very closely with that office when we are reviewing applications for admission every year.
And I think it's a good point to bring up that what Paul said about students aren't the ones looking at these at all. Like Becky said, it's a big holistic process, but it's definitely all admissions somewhere else. Like the people that you see at your information sessions that are students have no influence. I feel like that's a big question. It's like prospective students are trying to figure out who they need to influence to increase their chances of getting in.
And that's usually kind of the background of that question. Like, who do I got to talk to? Who do I got to get in front of? And you don't need to, nor should you, attempt to find that out, because one, it's not one person. There's never one single person making an admission decision at the university. I should clarify that in the Viterbi School of Engineering, we never make admission decisions. All admission decisions are made by the university admission office as a collective. And as a collective, that refers back to Becky's point about who's reading applications. A territory manager is someone who's responsible for organizing all those applications. However, they're not necessarily always the first one reading. They often are. But it's not a filtering process where sometimes other universities do this, where a university admission office will read an application and then will decide who is worthy enough to be considered by the academic unit, i.e. engineering, and then they'll go through an extensive further review of that application. That's not how this works. What we want to do is make sure that we're understanding that this is a fluid process where the applications are going through the system in a variety of fashions. In some situations, we may be the first person in the application and we may have influence. And the point being here is that this is a fluid system where applications are read somewhat simultaneously, sometimes in concert, and sometimes are referred back and forth in various ways, because at the end of the day, there are human beings that are trying to understand how other human beings are being understood. And no one's right, no one's wrong. I often will give examples about how I'll really like someone and want them to be admitted, and someone else at the university will say, no, they don't like that person, they like this other person. And I say like as a relative term here. I shouldn't say that someone we dislike or like some people, but just whether we want to put this on the admit track. And that disagreement is exactly the process that needs to happen, and that there's multiple people involved and we have multiple viewpoints. And again, we're not trying to make decisions on single applications. We're creating this incoming class. And when we're creating an incoming class, that means that we're bringing in lots of different types of individuals to create this overall really cool sense of what this place is all about.
And just to kind of touch on like, who do I need to influence or who do I need to talk to? You could talk to Angie all day, and then when file review starts, Brooke is the one that gets into your application first. And so it's really like we've kind of been saying, it's sort of this collective, and there's not one person that's responsible for your specific application.
I hope everyone got that. If I come across you at a information session the next year, I have no influence on your admission. So
Do you want
don't
to be
ask me if I
super
do.
clear about it?
This is kind of a different segue, but recently USC became an early action, not early action. Yeah, early
Early
action
action.
school. I always used to mess up early decision, early action, but recently we became an early action school. Does applying early action, quote unquote, boost my chances of getting into USC? This is kind of a multi-part. I can ask them all right now, just like get it out of the way, and whoever wants to jump in can. But what happens if I get deferred? And what are the differences between the kids that get in with merit and the regular admits? Like, I feel like everyone thinks that the merit kids are like these little unicorns that are getting in early action because they're super special. So just something that apparently is a common misconception, if you would all like to touch upon that.
Start with Becky, if you wouldn't mind giving an overview of like deadlines and timelines, and then let's get into most of the questions that Saafiyah is asking here.
Yeah. So early action. So yes, USC became an early action school 2 years ago. And early action is, for those of you who mistake the two, because I used to also mistake them. Early action is non-restrictive, non-binding. So if you are admitted early action, you are not obligated to attend USC. You can still apply other places, and you can, apply early other places. But we
don't
are
have any rules. We don't have any rules.
We don't
like
we
other
don't put any
schools.
restrictions on you at all. And so if you apply early action, the deadline to apply EA is November 1st. 11:59 p.m. your time zone. So very specific. 11:59 p.m. your time zone on November 1st. To be considered early action, you must apply early action. There's a drop down on the Common App that says regular decision or early action. If you apply regular decision by November 1st, that does not count. You have to apply early action by November 1st to be considered early action. November 1st is also our merit deadline. So you must apply early action by November 1st to also be considered for merit-based scholarships. These are sort of the larger university scholarships. If you apply by that deadline, then you are considered early action. The university and the Viterbi school start to review your applications. Sometime in late January is when you would.
If you apply by that deadline and you select early action
Yes.
on your application, I just want to make sure that's clear to everybody. 'Cause
Okay.
sometimes people are submitting by that deadline and choosing regular decision and confused because they
If
have
you-
to actively choose it.
Yeah, if you apply regular decision by November 1st, we do not review your file. You are regular decision, you are pushed back. So early action by November 1st. Then the university will start to review your application. Sometime in late January, you will hear back from the university that you have either been admitted or you have been deferred. So if you are deferred, you are now part of the regular decision pool. If you are admitted, there are a couple things that could happen at that time, but you have been, you've been admitted to USC for the full semester. The second deadline is just regular decision. That is January 15th. And so any early action applicants who are deferred and anyone who applies by January 15th is then part of the regular decision pool, and they will hear back sometime at the end of March, but no later than April 1st. There are the dates and deadlines.
Angie, transfer.
Oh, yes. I was ready to say something else, but
Oh, yeah. Well, let's just do the transfer, then jump in. What do you want to do?
sure. Transfers, there is no early action for you. You have one deadline, February 15, 2025, for fall 25. I know that can be a little confusing sometimes because you're applying the same year that you're thinking about transferring. So transfers, you have some time, relax. In fact, finish your fall semester term before you even think about working on your application. And that February 15th deadline is also your merit scholarship deadline. So transfers only have one deadline, and you will automatically be considered for merit scholarships through that February 15th transfer deadline.
What else were you going to say?
Well, to the point of Saafiyah, are my chances increased by applying early action, right? The majority of you will not be admitted through early action, by the way. And I quote, about 1/3 of the class, unquote. This is on the USC admission website. So, in fact, it is a pretty small number of students who are admitted early action. Most of you will be deferred.
And to clarify, what people a
Yeah.
lot of the time misunderstand about what you just said is
Mhm.
they think they have 1/3 of a chance,
Yeah.
and it's 1/3 of our incoming class. That is not a 33% chance of admission. Most people are like, oh, it's a third. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like people like I said it to people and I had to repeat it 4 times for them to get like, no, 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 no. Like, no, like about the number of people we're going to be admitting, about a third of them will be the number of people, about a third of the entire university admitted pool will be from that early action group. And then keep going. Sorry, I want to jump in.
Oh, yeah.
Just because so many
Thank
people
you. No.
hear a number and they're like they latch onto that number. So I want to
Yeah.
be so clear.
Yeah. Especially engineers. We know you guys are good at math, so or not. We'll see. So
Jeez.
so and then gosh, I lost my train of thought. But so
I'm
the
sorry.
majority of you will be deferred. No, 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 it's okay. The majority of you will be deferred, and that's okay. But for the merit scholarship process, not everyone who is admitted early action will be interviewed or invited to interview or continue further, I should say, in the scholarship consideration pool. So from the small number of students admitted EA, an even smaller number of students will be further continued for merit scholarships.
Right. Be chosen as finalists. Then we go through a process in there. And then from the finalists, we choose who we're going to award a scholarship. And then of those that are going to get awarded scholarships, there are, and then variations on value of scholarship going all the way up to full tuition, but there's also half tuition scholarships, quarter tuition scholarships, and smaller ones beyond that. And I think that's a nice little segue to the myths and legends related to scholarship. I want a scholarship. I know you want a scholarship. Or someone says, I got a scholarship, and they think that they're comparing themselves. Like someone else at my school got a scholarship last year. And everyone here, from a high school perspective, I think everyone thinks full tuition scholarship, and that is the smallest number. Like full tuition is the least amount of scholarships that are given out. You know, obviously there's a number of full tuition scholarships, but there's more half tuition scholarships, and then there's more quarter tuition scholarships, and then there's a number of students that receive even smaller scholarships. And so just keep that in mind when you're thinking about friends or people that you know, and sometimes they might even boast like, oh yeah, I got a scholarship there, I got a scholarship there. The majority of the time they didn't get a full tuition scholarship. Just keep that in mind. So, because you will start freaking out if you believe that you're the only one that didn't get a full tuition scholarship. Most people use this shorthand. And if there's any parents listening, parents always use this shorthand as well. Oh, my kid got all these scholarships, and they may be talking about like $1,000 here, $1,000 there. And there are lots of those scholarships out there, and we are a very generous institution, but don't think that there's something afoot when you're missing a full tuition scholarship. It is incredibly rare and highly, highly competitive.
Well, and if I could kind of just like add a quick clarification, we are talking merit scholarships.
Thank you.
Everyone of the listeners, there is a completely different process for need-based financial aid, which the university also awards a generous amount. But in this context that we're talking about, it's strictly merit scholarships.
Yes, thank you for that. That is a often confusing element, and people will use the term financial aid to refer to scholarships. They'll use scholarships to refer to financial aid. It just kind of goes back and forth. And so we always refer to scholarships as the merit-based scholarships and financial aid as need-based financial aid. That is a separate process by which a student applies through the FAFSA, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and the CSS profile, which is from collegeboard.com. Those are processes that we recommend every family go through if you've never done it before. And you can find all that information on the financial aid website, which is financialaid.usc.edu. I would not necessarily worry about it prior to applying because there's plenty of work to do to apply. But once you have applied, I would then start diving into that. If a family has questions about need and how need is calculated, every single university has what's referred to as a net price calculator, or NPC. And I would encourage you to look at USC's net price calculator to get a sense of how USC will determine need for your family. You can find that at usc.edu/NPC, or just Google USC net price calculator. There is one specifically for first year students. There's one specifically for transfer students. And every college and university has these. So you can get a sense of that as you go into that. Again, it's not a guarantee of money, but it gives you a good sense of how need will break down.
I just want to clarify kind of what Angie said. Applying early action is not going to affect your chances of whether you get in or not. I know Sherry said that, but I really want to specify that because that's a question I even get a lot at information sessions. And also, don't be discouraged if you don't get in early action. Like Angie said, it's a very small percentage of students, and just because you got deferred doesn't mean you've lost all hope of getting into USC. So just hold tight after you get your deferral and just wait until a normal decision and see what happens then before you start freaking out and emailing all of the admission counselors. I have just a couple more common myths/misconceptions. One of them, I didn't know that this was a thing, but apparently a lot of high schoolers and on Reddit think it is, but they said that only your not only, but your junior year grades are what matter most. Any thoughts?
Incorrect. Well, I mean, they all matter. All your grades matter. But we will also be looking at your senior fall grades. So I often tell students when I'm meeting with them, like, that is not the time to take it easy. You should continue in rigor, if at all possible, if you want to be a competitive applicant. Don't slack off, don't take the easy classes. Look at all those things. So all your grades matter. You want more A's than B's, obviously, if you want to be competitive. But try and do well. Try and do well all 4 years.
And kind of going off what Lisa said, so we will look at your fall grades. We want your senior year. We'll look at 9 through 11, then we will look at your senior fall grades. We will have those usually before decisions are made. You still have to do well in the spring of your senior year too, because I don't know if students know this, your admission decision is not a contract that is set in stone. Your all admission letters say you are admitted based on the successful completion of the courses you are currently enrolled in. And so if you slack off spring semester of your senior year and fail all your classes, we have the right to rescind your admission. So it is really important to continue to do well, A's and B's, doing well in the courses throughout all 4 years of high school.
I mean, every offer of admission is conditional. A lot of people don't understand that. And we had the horrible scenario where this year in particular, one student is not attending, and the student was admitted early action, meaning that it was admitted based on grades up to junior year. And then once we saw senior year grades, everything was very not good. And I do mean very. As a result of that, we had to take action and unfortunately uninvite that student. We want to understand that there's always context involved. And I am speaking about extreme hyperbolic situations. I'm sure you're all not going to do those things, but to put a very specific point at the end of the sentence, every year matters. And I will also add onto something that if important rigorous classes such as calculus are in progress in your senior year, well, guess what? Now senior year is the most important, right? And that fall term will be the set of grades that we're going to see likely in order to make that decision. We might need to wait until we see those fall grades in order to make a decision because we cannot understand your preparation to be successful in our program without them. So no, junior year is not the most important. This is an old adage. And I think it's something that, just we need to get out of the zeitgeist.
And I will say again, as a transfer student, I know senioritis really hits in, especially spring, but if you are doing the 1 year transfer to USC, you still are submitting your high school grades when you apply as a transfer. And it's still something that is considered. So definitely don't slack off because you don't know how admission processes are going to go. So you don't want to throw all your eggs in one basket and just goof off your last semester.
I would take it a slightly different stance. I mean, I would say that let's say that you've kind of said, okay, this isn't going to work for me, and I'm going to work towards a transfer goal in the future. And first off, never give up. Do your best. Throw in your application as a first year student. Don't count yourself out as a first year student. Oftentimes, we get students. Because what I really want to pinpoint there, Saafiyah, is that sometimes students may hear what you just said and say, oh, okay, cool. I won't apply as a first year student. I'm going to apply as a transfer student in the future. So you don't want them to pull out. You don't want them to get away because applying as if you're in high school now, applying as a transfer student in the future is always in that future. But let's give yourself a chance now and see what happens because you never want to assume that you are either qualified or not qualified enough. You never want to assume that you have a good chance of admission or that you have a bad chance of admission. And quite honestly, everyone has the same chance of admission because we want to mix our class up with different types of people. And we want to understand your ability to contribute to our community. And you tell us what that is. We'll figure that out. When a student pulls out of high school, let's say just emotionally, or let's say psychologically, or they're just like, I'm not in it anymore. Your point, we want to see we want to see the high school grade for our transfer applicant, but also we're not necessarily looking at them because grades in college, whatever college you're going to, community college, for example, it's going to be harder than high school. It's going to be more advanced. And so how you do there is going to wash out a lot of what you did in high school. So we are concerned about the college grades, not about the high school grades when you're a transfer applicant. That said, I brought this whole long topic up because I truly believe that continuity is most important in an education. And that if a student coming out of junior year says, whatever, I'm out, let's just see what happens, and then they think they're going to pick it back up and be an A student in college, it's going to be harder than you think. And I often equate it to like training, whether that's like you're a runner, you're a swimmer, or you're in the weight room. If you take a year off from training, you're not going to be as good or anywhere near as good as you were when you stopped. And so continuity and that idea of like consistent effort and pattern wise, like that is going to be incredibly important. Like, for example, Lisa, when you take a break from weightlifting and you come back in it this week, what happens?
You may or may not get a herniated disc.
That's
And
traumatizing.
Lisa may or may not be on some serious pain medication during the recording of this episode due to a
May or may
herniated
not.
disc due to trying to do something that she hadn't done for quite some time in the weight room.
Yeah. So learn from my mistakes. Best piece of advice for today.
Sorry, I knew that's where I was going, and I just had a really long runway to get there. And I was like, I'm setting this up.
Okay, leading into our next question really quickly. Paul, you just mentioned, you said something about creating like a diverse class. I think a lot of people have the misconception that this means also geographically, like they think that there's admission caps on acceptances per high schools.
No. Okay, so when we speak about a diverse class, it does mean everything, right? It means who you are. It means where you're from. It means what you do. It means how you think. It means your ability to contribute. It means what you've done in high school, because we can't have everyone be captain of the football team. We can't have everyone be ASB student body president. In presentations, I often make a very kind of quick, like high school stereotype joke, which is like, if we want the jock captain of the football team, we also need the cheerleader. We also need the nerd. We also need the bookworm. We also need the captain of the math team. And we also need that one quiet kid that's done really, really well throughout the whole entire high school. Like it's not, hopefully people understand the analogy there, that it's not one type of person what we're going to need. And then you kind of extrapolate that across all the other levels. And that when we're not trying to fill buckets saying like, okay, we got our 2 football captains, we're done. We got our 2 kids from North Dakota, we're done. That's not the case. We need to make sure that we're constantly aware of the end result, that while never the exact goal, we're not trying to make sure that we have this equal representation of certain populations. We do want to make sure that we do have representation of humanity, of society. And that when someone's sitting next to someone in their intro to engineering class in their first year, that they all have the same common denominator of academic preparation and that they can do well. But the numerators is what's different. They're from different places. They think in different ways. They have different ideas, different contributions, different personalities. And hopefully people are getting to know people from not only around the country, but around the world. And this is an interesting element. But to the specific point, there are not specific caps from high schools, but they are competing against one another, right? And so like when if a student has done better than someone else and taken the same classes, well, then that's kind of in their own world. And more to the point, on the other end of that spectrum, we don't want everyone from the same high school.
Yeah.
Because that would make a lot of sense. So while there aren't specific caps, we are trying to make sure that we are creating a pool of students in our incoming class that is representative of the entire country, of the entire world, of humanity. If that's a broad stroke, but that's what we're trying to do.
The next 2 questions I have are a little more on the burning question end of this episode.
Like that's going to burn us? Like when you ask the question, or what does it mean?
I feel
burning?
like there might be like a longer pause than the audience is expecting to hear after a question.
Oh my God, you're prepping us for like the weirdest, awkward
I
question.
know. I'm kind of scared.
It's not too bad. One of them is just about the impact of legacy at the school. I know it's a joke that a lot of people like to make, especially. So just wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on that.
Well, you know, usually we'd be like bouncing around. So for there is legislation that just passed in California that no longer allows university to use legacy status in the admission process. So while we were able to use that in the past to a small degree, I will say it wasn't like your legacy, you're in. We
Yeah,
can
that
no
was never
longer
the case.
we can no longer consider that in the admission process. So the Common App folks will still ask you if you have, I think, siblings attending the college or family that has attended, but we as admission counselors will not have access to that data.
Yep. So the answer is a very clear no, and we will never know it, and we will never be allowed to know it. It will never be on the application.
Perfect. Thank you for clearing that up. I'm sure the rumors will still never end, but it's good to have a definitive answer online somewhere
Oh, we're going to
as
be answering this
proof.
question for years, and people are not
Yeah.
going to believe it, and on both sides of the coin, because there's going to be alums that are going to be like, "But you're going to know, right?" I'm like, "No," and also, and to Angie's point, it never was this thing where like, "Oh, well, you know, wink, wink, nod, nod, come on in." No,
Mhm.
not at all. I mean, more often the case. I mean, my colleagues here know this. I spend most of my time after admission decisions go out dealing with very angry alumni parents all the
I
time.
cannot imagine.
And they believed, whether we told them that or not, they believed that their offspring had a spot, and it had nothing to do with that. And that's really a hard conversation to have. So gonna keep
Yeah.
happening.
I can't imagine the scoring emails you all get from different parents.
Oh,
And I wouldn't
they're
even know
fun.
how to respond.
They're fun.
So.
They're fun.
This kind of falls along the same line, and I'm mostly asking this because when I was sitting in on one of the scholarship interviews, a student asked this, and I had no clue what to say. So I just left it to the admissions counselor and the teacher that were there to take care of it. But he was asking about USC's image of spoiled children, so like University of Spoiled Children slash spoiled rich kids. Again, any thoughts that we all have on this?
Let me give background,
Mhm.
because I think now this myth and legend of USC exists in certain circles, and I'm going to take a random shot in the dark that question was coming from a student who grew up in Orange County, right?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Was
So
I there with you, Saafiyah? I feel like I've heard that question. I was asked the same question in an interview.
Was it this past cycle?
Yeah.
Then yes, probably me.
Okay. I remember that.
yeah, so like back in the 80s, like meaning the 1900s, the 1980s, you know, in the last century, to be as clear as possible, there was a common refrain that USC, the other universities would always call us the University of Spoiled Children. And when I grew up in the 1900s, that's what I thought of it as well. And you know, that changed rather quickly, starting in the 1990s, the late 1900s. And obviously it is not the case, mostly because of what we just talked about with admission and representation and pulling lots of people, because at the time it was not necessarily a worldwide international institution of acclaim. And it is. And that's just very, very different. So I mean, I'll let everyone else jump in like what they think, but also Saafiyah, back to you. I mean, like, regardless of history or some sort of old myth and legend, when you're asked that question, when you think of your friends and people that you know, what do you think? Because it doesn't matter what we say from an institutional perspective, but from you and your like, who is that? What you find?
I definitely heard that misconception before I got to USC, and
Because you grew up in Orange County.
yeah, because I grew up in Orange County.
I'm like, again, it's a very specific small subset. Orange County, 30 miles south of Los Angeles. It's a
Yeah,
very
and I was
specific
also
bubble.
like growing up on YouTube when a bunch of scandals were going on and people really liked to make this claim about USC and the little bubble I was growing up in, for sure. But once I got to USC and really experienced the culture there, I kind of even forgot that was a stereotype until I was sitting on that interview with Angie. And I was just so thrown off because I hadn't heard about it since maybe my junior year of high school. For context, I'm a rising senior, so it's been a minute. But it threw me off because I didn't even know that that was still something that came up, and a conception or a what is it called? A misconception that people had of USC anymore, because I really don't see it in my classes day to day. I will say Viterbi does a good job of making that diverse class profile, because I have come across honestly all the stereotypes. I've seen the captain of the football team, the ASB president, the cheerleader, all in my computer science lab at the same time. So it's definitely kind of something that I didn't even think about anymore.
You know what if we're thinking about the same student, we had this great conversation after, and the faculty really helped. But one thing I told him was there's spoiled children everywhere. So I went to a school that shall not be named, but you all can put, thoughts and
Oh,
Google.
you can
But
tell people. Come
About
I went
10
to
miles
a-
away from here.
Yeah, I went to UCLA, and it's a public school, and I've had friends who've gone to other public institutions, and the matter of fact is there are spoiled children everywhere, and even broader, there are different people everywhere. So as a college, like you just said, Saafiyah, there's so many different people, and they're all in one class, and you're all there learning together. So that's what I remember telling that student. I remember this. They stood out to me.
They
Some of
seemed
this
almost,
might
oh, good.
go ahead.
They seemed almost disappointed in the answer too, as if they wanted us to acknowledge it and say like, yes, you're totally correct about that. And they were just like, oh, okay.
That's a whole other talk show about how students ask questions and what they think we're gonna like. I have a whole other thing about why some students ask some questions, because they like
Yeah.
think they're gonna get a rise out of us, or like they think they unlock some sort of secret where we're like, ooh, how do you know that? I've heard every question. It doesn't matter. And more often than not, they're asking questions because they think they need to and they don't need to. Like, just especially in those interviews. But there's a larger problem in the United States about affluence and support of people who go to college and selective institutions. That is true regardless of institutions. To Angie's point, public, private, it's a question of whether it is perceived as a quote unquote elite institution or selective college and university. And everybody listening to this is applying to all of those. One of the problems in higher education right now is everyone's applying to the same 20 schools. And it's not harder to get into college. It's actually easier to get into college these days because there are more colleges, and people are not applying to the ones that are, admitting up to 2/3, 3/4 of their entire application pool. We're just talking about the same groups of universities are only admitting 10%. There's a couple other stats that I'd throw in there, right? Over 2/3 of the entire USC population is on some sort of financial aid. That's an important thing to understand. And there's a misconception that there's a correlation to the public price tag of a private institution in relationship to the student's ability to be able to pay for that. So therefore, there's an assumption that only rich kids go to a private school because they can afford the nearly $100,000 a year of an estimated cost of attendance. What they don't realize is that with a robust financial aid program offering 100% of a student's determined need to go to USC, in many cases, a student goes to USC because it was the most inexpensive school for them to go to, because they were comparing financial aid packages, need-based financial aid that we talked about before, at selective public institutions that don't have that same financial aid budget compared to our institution and compared to other private institutions that don't meet 100% of needs. So at the end of the day, different colleges and universities, let's just leave it on the private school level, that cost roughly the same estimated cost of attendance. The same families will receive different financial aid packages because it's either calculated differently or it's because that university has a determination of meeting a percentage of their need, not 100% of their need. And so, I can personally go back again, if we go way back in the day to the 1900s, and I was comparing financial aid packages of schools that I got into that actually fit me. The only reason that I am here today is because USC was the cheapest school for me to go to. And that was compared to the UCs. I had my own personal story, doesn't matter here about all this other stuff, but I was looking at packages and I was like, I can go anywhere. I don't necessarily think I want to go to USC based on the previous conversation that we had about spoiled kids. And then I realized, oh, no, this is it. And then when I went there, I had the same experience you have. It's this idea of everyone's here, and lots of different people benefit from going to USC. And that's true of a lot of institutions.
Yeah, I will say USC was also my cheapest option as well. And I feel like that's true for a lot of my friends at school. It's just something that ends up happening. And it's not really something that even gets discussed, because I feel like once you get to the school, you realize that, like you said, 2/3 of the students there have some kind of financial backing that's helping them. And it kind of gets blurred once you get here. Like, you'll have those moments where you run across those spoiled rich kids, but like Angie said, they're apparent at every college you go to, but because this misconception's already in the air at USC, once you run across it at USC, it just gets hyped up way too much.
Mm.
That wraps up all of the questions I had. I was trying to find some really, really
I thought
juicy
they would be
ones.
like crazy questions. These
I
were
thought
crazy
they were gonna be
questions.
crazy too, but all the Reddit pages I had were just focused on the rich kids and the legacy, so I couldn't find anything else. Are there any questions that you have
Do
heard
you guys
in
remember crazy questions you've gotten where you're like, what is that all about? Nothing. We can cut out all this dead air, by the way.
I was going to say nothing crazy. I mean, I feel like we get the same
Yeah.
questions over and over again. We get the misconception or them, a student hearing us saying something and a student or family hearing something different than what we're actually saying. I don't think I've gotten any crazy questions. Have you, Paul?
I mean, I get, like you said, misconceptions. I get rumors and stereotypes. I get people that live on Reddit and then formulate questions based on what they believe is a foundation of truth that they created from Reddit. And I will honestly start answering them with, have you been on Reddit a lot? Because that question just sounds crazy. Because it's not even the question that's crazy. It's like, it's all the preconceived knowledge that they've built into their brain prior to asking that question. And they'll even ask the questions in that way. So I know you do this, and this when you're reviewing applications. So as a result of that, I have this question. I'm like, well, let's stop there. Let's go rewind all the way back here because everything you just said isn't true. And how do we unwind that information? So while I don't have specific questions that I can think of off the top of my head, I will say that the more information that's available online, the more it's driving you as a prospective applicant crazy. And to stay off of Reddit and to stay off of forums and trust your gut. Be authentic. If you have a question, ask us. We're happy to do so. But also try not to read into that a lot. I mean, one trend I'm seeing in our email inbox these days is almost like you're asking us to do your homework for you. We're like, could you tell me all about these opportunities? And then I will read that kid's application and my email is in their application. Like, I can't wait to be at USC because I know that I want to do this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, so you're thinking that you got the answer from the teacher and that's going to get you an A on the paper. And I'm like, I remember answering your email about that. And so, also the other thing is, this is what we should really, really discuss. If people have waited this long to get to this question, there is no such thing at USC as demonstrated interest. And what that means is that there's no thing that we're keeping track of that like, oh, this one student visited us, emailed us 4 times, called us, told us he loves us, and that's going into the evaluation of your application. Don't do that. What you're really doing when you do that is filling up our inbox and wasting our time. We don't play games in our application process. You don't need to formulate questions because you believe you're supposed to ask questions. We're cool if you don't have any questions. And honestly, we make our website so that you don't have any questions. More often these days, when a question's being asked, I'm like, my response is a website, is a web page. Here it is. Check it out. And you could have just Googled it. I don't ever answer that way, but there's so many other things that are there. But like sometimes people have legit questions about process and they're concerned about something, and we want to help. We're there to do that. But more often these days, the students, families that are in touch with us are usually just thinking that they're completing some sort of checklist. Like, I've asked them 4 questions and therefore I'm good. Or I've sent them a 10-minute long email. And I know it's really good because I use Chat GPT to write the email, which is also my new pet peeve. I've now brought up 2 podcasts in a row. So don't, even though today, by the way, today we all had an experience with AI that blew our minds, that we now have a new AI tool. Has nothing to do with admission, but it is a tool that we use that just like blew our minds, that helped us with a meeting we were having. So anyway, I don't know why I brought that up. It has nothing to do with this. Any other thoughts on crazy question?
Oh, long story short, if your question starts with "I heard somewhere" or "my friend told me,"
Oh yeah,
chances are it's wrong, or
yeah.
it's grounded in a misconception.
You are stating something that is definitely wrong.
Yes, your 18-year-old friend knows nothing about the admission process at USC or Viterbi. I kind of wanted just to double down on something Paul was talking about. We do not do demonstrated interest. I'm at a phase in my life where a lot of my my adult friends have kids who are starting to apply to college. So I get the phone calls, the text messages. Oh, Becky, I know you work at USC. What about this? What about this? And when I say there's a territory manager, there's someone, responsible for your student's high school, they say, oh, should we email them? And my response is, do you have a question? Because if you have a question, by all means, but don't just email just to email. And I think that's a really important part, at least at how USC reviews, demonstrated interest, which we don't, and emails. But if you have a question, yes, absolutely. If you don't have a question, there's no need, because we'll get the emails, we'll read it, and we'll be like, am I supposed to respond to this? There's no question in the email. So just something to think about before you start emailing admission counselors across the country.
That made me think of another one. I often get emails saying, I'd like to visit. Great, cool. Here's a link. Sign up for one of our programs. Can I also meet with you? No, like you don't need to.
I will be presenting during your visit.
Yeah, I'll be the one presenting, or I'm not. Brooke's presenting. You're going to talk to Brooke. She's great. She has the same answers. Great. So I'll meet with Brooke. I'll ask her questions. But can I meet with you afterwards? No. Like, what are we going to do? Talk about the same thing? And what I know they're trying to get at is that they believe they had to get in front of somebody. Mm-hmm. And we make a joke that they like compare titles. Like, okay, I got to get in front of that title. I get in front of that territory manager. I get in front of that specific director because they're going to have an influence. And we all have the same influence, number one. Number two, we're not, to be completely transparent, I'm not going to remember you. Like, I meet so many people. I barely remember people that work with us, and my staff can tell you that. I'm like, who's that person again? Oh yeah, I don't know. There's too many people in my life.
If you haven't worked here more than 3 years, he doesn't know who you are.
It's a good point. No, I know who you are. I just don't know your name. I know. Hey, she works here, right? But no, I'm not trying to be mean about it. But my point is, like, you don't need to go through this checklist of influence. It doesn't work that way. And back to our earlier conversation of like, there's lots of people involved and we all have input, and none of us have some sort of like thumb on the scale to be like, yes, this is the one that makes it an absolute positive yes. It's a collaborative process, and I will never claim that I know students better than anyone else, because I don't.
And I think it becomes apparent when they try to get admission counselors' emails, even though they're all publicly available and everyone has the little cards as well. Yeah. But students will very like slyly ask for contact information as if that's going to help in their admissions process. And then most of the time I just see the admission counselor giving their card and it's like, yeah, it's publicly available. You can take it if you want.
Not hard to find. Here you go. Yeah. Like some sort of secret. I have the secret number I can get in.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any other questions that anyone has that they've been asked in an information session, scholarship interview, anything? I feel like we've covered most of the ones that are frequently asked, at least.
I think we did. Are you guys happy? Any other things you want to add in? Okay. Well, with that, I appreciate all the questions, Saafiyah, and you doing your hard-hitting research on Reddit and all the social media platforms to let us know what the burning questions are out there. As a reminder to all of our students that are out there that are applying, I hope that you found this helpful as much as we were just kind of joking around here. I mean, we do find it a privilege that you're even considering USC as an institution to apply to. We would be honored if you chose to complete that application to us. And if we are, through a selective process, we can only select a certain amount of people. We would be lucky to have any of you here in our programs. If you have further questions about this and you want to learn more, I encourage you to visit, again, not for the point's sake, but just to learn more. We have campus visit programs going on year round on weekdays, typically Mondays and Fridays during the academic year, every once in a while, an occasional Wednesday. On the weekends throughout the months of September and October, we have campus visit programs that I'm sure you might have heard about. And those will be going on. I'm sorry, campuses. We have events going on in cities across the country and around the world. So if you're in New York, we'll be in New York. If you're in South Florida, we'll be in South Florida. If you're in Dallas and Houston, Chicago and Seattle and Honolulu and Beijing and Shanghai and London, we have all programs in all these different areas USC does, and the Viterbi School will be at every single one of those. It's an opportunity to learn more about our programs, ask questions, and just, again, feel part of the continuity of learning how to apply and to get that application process. But I stress it's not about points, because sometimes, as successful and highly involved high school students, you might be busy. Don't Don't miss the track meet to come to that event. Don't miss your final performance in orchestra to come to that event. That is far more important than what we're doing. And all the stuff that we're talking about is available on our website through booklets and mailings and emails that we send you, and we will continue to do that. If you are not on our mailing list, you can go to viterbiadmission.usc.edu/contact and fill out a form so that you get on our mailing list. We always want to make sure that we're sending you up-to-date information and helpful tips as you go through this process. Other than that, thank you, Becky. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Angie. And thank you, Lisa, for joining us with this hard-hitting Q&A session. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. We'll see you next week of another episode of Viterbi Voices. Bye-bye.